Hello and welcome to OpenRelay Screenside Chats episode 13. Today we are going to be talking about 0x order types. So I have a lot of people ask me about certain trading terminology and how it relates to 0x. So today we are going to talk about some trading terms that are generally pretty common in commodities trading, stock trading, and they do have equivalents in 0x trading, although sometimes they're not terribly obvious. So some of those terms that we're going to be talking about: limit orders, stop limit orders, market orders, and partial fills. So a limit order is an offer to buy or sell an asset at a particular price. And there are a few variations on limit orders. You have buy limit orders, sell limit orders, and stop limit orders. We'll talk about each of these in detail in a moment. But basically, with limit orders, these are offers to buy or sell assets that will execute at a particular price at an unknown time in the future. So sometimes you'll hear traders talking about wanting to get caring more about time than price, or caring more about price than time. With limit orders, they care more about the price at which they are buying or selling an asset than they care about when they actually make that trade. We'll talk about market orders in a few minutes, which is where they care more about making a trade right now than they care about the price at which they do it. So when we're talking about buy limit orders, and for most of this presentation, I'm going to use oil as an example of a commodity that you might be trading for the purposes of these buy, sell, and stop limit orders. So in this case, say you put out an order, you are trying to buy oil at $50 a barrel, and say you've put out an order saying, I will buy 10 barrels of oil at $50 a barrel. In this part of the graph, where the price of oil is above $50 a barrel, anybody who has a barrel of oil is not going to sell it to you at $50 a barrel because they have somebody else they can sell it to for more. Once the price drops, but that basically means that there's nobody out there looking for oil at trying to buy oil at greater than $50 a barrel. The people who have oil to sell will then sell it to you at that $50 a barrel that you had offered with your buy limit order. So you don't know necessarily when the price of oil is going to hit $50 a barrel and you're going to get your 10 barrels of oil. You have just put out a standing offer to buy 10 barrels of oil at $50 a barrel whenever somebody is willing to sell it to you at that price. The flip side of this is sell limit orders. So if you were trying to sell oil and you had, say, 10 barrels of oil that you wanted to sell, and you wanted to get $70 a barrel for that oil, if there are other people selling oil at $50 a barrel, nobody's going to buy your $70 barrel because they can get the same thing from somebody else for less. But once your $70 a barrel of oil is the cheapest barrel of oil that anybody who can need oil can find, you can expect that your $70 barrel will get sold and your order will execute. When we talk about stop limit orders, also called stop loss orders, they work a little differently from the buy limit and sell limit orders. Essentially, a stop limit order is a standing order to sell an asset if the price drops below a certain level. So, for example, if you had a barrel of oil, you might have a sell limit order to sell your barrel of oil at $70 a barrel, but you might put a stop limit order at $45 a barrel, where if the price of oil in the market drops below $45 a barrel, you're just going to sell your barrel at that price to stop your losses and limit how much you could potentially lose as the price of oil continues to fall. Stop limit orders depend on an established market price. the order can't be executed until the market reaches that specified price. So this is important because, if you have a stop limit order for $45 a barrel, you don't want people to be able to go buy your barrel at $45 a barrel when other people are buying barrels of oil at $60 a barrel. You don't want to sell your barrel of oil until it drops to that price. So stop limit orders are only fillable on the condition that the market price has dropped to a certain level. So that necessitates a concept of an established market price that people agree this is the current market price of whatever commodity you're trying to buy and sell. So when we talk about limit orders on 0x, it's key to understand that the orders that are on OpenRelay are limit orders. They are buy limit orders and sell limit orders. But when we're talking about 0x tokens, buying and selling is not always clear. If you're offering 0x tokens in exchange for Digix Gold tokens, what are you buying and what are you selling? Are you buying Digix Gold or are you selling ZRX? It's not clear necessarily what is a buy order and what is a sell order. When we're talking oil versus dollars, there's a clear, if somebody is selling oil, you wouldn't really say they're buying dollars. You'd say they're selling oil. And likewise, you wouldn't say that somebody is selling their dollars and buying oil. It's just they're buying oil, they're selling oil. When we're talking about dollars, there's usually one object that is being bought or sold. But when we're talking about cryptocurrencies and other digital assets, it's not always the case where there is a clear denominating currency like dollars. So a trade of 0x for Digix Gold tokens are not necessarily buy orders or sell orders, but they are still limit orders in that those orders are going to execute when the price is good. That means when somebody agrees that I'm willing to give this amount of ZRX in exchange for that amount of Digix Gold because nobody else is going to give me a better deal than that. That is the general idea of limit orders, and those limit orders execute when the price is good. Now, when we talk about stop limit orders on 0x, these are not possible without a trusted intermediary. So with 0x, the order book is kept off-chain. Contracts cannot be used to determine a market price because they can't see the market. All of the orders that are available of who is trying to buy and sell what are kept off the blockchain, and they are not visible from an on-chain contract. This means that orders cannot become valid based on a market price. So absent the market price, you can't really do stop limit orders in 0x without a trusted intermediary. Now, if you are willing to give your funds to some trusted intermediary and say, or give access to your funds to some trusted intermediary and say, when the market price, which I will trust you to determine, reaches a certain range, I want you to go ahead and sell my assets and give me whatever you get for them. But there's not a way to do that in a totally trustless way where that person that you were trusting to set the market price couldn't just lie and take your assets saying, oh, well, the price for these fell to zero, so I sold them all for you. Sorry. Oh, I also happen to be the buyer on the other end of that transaction. So anyway, stop limit orders aren't really a thing in 0x. You might be able to find somebody who's willing to act as a trusted intermediary, but you should be very cautious in that circumstance. Now, if you wanted something kind of equivalent to a stop limit order, you could potentially run an application that's constantly monitoring the market and will create an order and post that order, to sell your assets when the price hits a certain range. But there are not standing stop limit orders like there are in more traditional marketplaces. Anybody have questions so far? Okay. So next we're going to talk about market orders. Market orders fill available limit orders. So a market order executes now at a price determined by the market. So we talked earlier about how limit orders will execute at some undetermined point in the future at a price that you've predefined. A market order says, I want to trade these assets now, but I want, and I'm willing to take whatever the market price for this asset is right now. So essentially, when we talk about market orders, there are kind of two approaches that we can take. We can say with a market order, I want to buy as much oil as I can get for $500. And depending on the market conditions, that might mean I get 8 barrels of oil. That might mean I get 12 barrels of oil. But essentially, you are committing, I am going to pay $500 for as much oil as I can get from the market. The other way you can think about market oil orders is to say, I want 10 barrels of oil at the best price available. So again, you might end up paying $500 for that 10 barrels of oil, but here you are framing it in terms of, I need this much oil. Maybe I've got a fleet of vehicles that I've got to run, and it doesn't matter what I have to pay to get this 10 barrels of oil. I need 10 barrels of oil. So you can specify, I need 10 barrels of oil and at the best available price. So really, there's also, the flip side of these, sell as much oil as I can for $500, or sell these 10 barrels of oil. Generally with oil, or with commodities, you would be trying to, if you're selling, you'd be trying to sell everything you have. But when you're buying, you might frame it in terms of how much you want to spend, or you might frame it in terms of how much you want to acquire. So how do market orders work in 0x? Well, they're on the 0x exchange smart contract. There are actually contract calls that you can make for market sell orders and market buy orders. Again, in terms of 0x, I don't really like the buy and sell terminology, just because it depends on what position you're taking, and there's not necessarily a clear buy and sell like there is with dollars when you're trading two volatile assets. But with a market sell order, the taker, who is the person who is calling the smart contract, specifies the amount of tokens that they want to spend filling this order. So using our ZRX for Digix Gold token, they might say, I want to spend 100 ZRX getting as much Digix Gold as I could. With a market buy order, the taker is still the one calling it, but they specify it the other way around. They might say, I want to spend my ZRX getting, 1 Digix Gold, and however much ZRX I have to spend to get 1 Digix Gold, I want to spend that so that I end up with exactly 1 Digix Gold when this transaction completes. Now, with these market orders, because in 0x, the orders themselves are kept off chain, you can't just make a call to 0x saying, I want to trade ZRX for Digix Gold at this, and I want this amount. Instead, the way you have to frame that is you have to tell the contract, here are a bunch of orders that you could execute to fill this. So given this collection of orders, spend 50 ZRX acquiring Digix Gold, or spend as much ZRX as necessary to acquire 1 Digix Gold. So for this to work, the caller has to search a 0x order book like OpenRelay, find a bunch of orders that they would consider acceptable. And so they can leave out orders where the fees are too high, or they can leave out orders where the price is just out of a range they're willing to pay. So they can constrain, in some sense, the orders within which this might get filled, but then they submit all of those in a single Ethereum transaction to be filled. And the value, the reason you would submit a collection of orders instead of just submitting a single order that you want to fill is that when you submit a 0x transaction to the blockchain, it may sit in the 0x transaction or in the Ethereum transaction pool for several minutes or even up to several hours before that transaction actually gets confirmed by the Ethereum blockchain. In that time, other orders might be filled that would fill the limit orders that you had submitted, which means the best available orders that you had submitted might not be available by the time your order actually confirms. So by submitting several orders, you're making it more likely that this order is going to be able to succeed by, moving progressively through the orders until it finds some order that has not been filled and it can, go ahead and fill it on the blockchain. Does anybody have questions about market orders? Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about is partial fills. And partial fills occur when only part of a limit order is executed. So again, back to our barrels of oil example, say I've got an order offering 100 barrels of oil at $60 each, and somebody bought 20 barrels of oil for $1,200. That means I still have 80 barrels of oil available at $60 a piece. That means that somebody else could come along and buy another 20 barrels of oil, or somebody else could come along and buy 80 barrels of oil. That order is still out there and able to be filled for the rest of the barrels that have not yet been sold. So in 0x, partial fills are a standard feature of 0x. You don't have to fill an order completely. You can partially fill an order, and that order will remain fillable for the remaining amount. 0x orders are specified in terms of the total offer and total demand. So for example, you might say, I am offering 1,000 ZRX in exchange for 3 wrapped ether. That order is cryptographically signed. So once it has been partially filled, it's still going to say, I'm offering 1,000 ZRX in exchange for 3 wrapped ether. But the 0x exchange contract remembers that order, and it remembers that it has been partially filled. So you are not going to be able to fill an order for more than the offer that was originally signed, even if it has already been partially filled by somebody else. A relayer like OpenRelay will remove filled orders from the order book so that when you run a query against the order book, you don't get any orders that are not going to be fillable. And OpenRelay provides an available taker token amount in the order metadata. So in addition to telling you that this is an order of 1,000 ZRX for 3 wrapped ether, if, for example, somebody had already bought 1 wrapped ether worth of ZRX, we are going to tell you that there are 2 wrapped ether worth of ZRX available in this order. And we are going to include that in the metadata with the order when you query our order book. That said, after you query our order book, it would always be good to query the exchange contract before trying to fill limit orders. And when I say users should do that, what I really mean is client applications should do that. So in all likelihood, a an application is going to query OpenRelay and get a list of orders that are available. And then a user is going to stare at their screen for a few seconds to a few minutes, scratching their head and trying to decide what to do, maybe struggle with the user interface a little bit. And eventually they're going to decide which orders they want to fill. Before the application actually submits an order to the blockchain, because the user is going to have to pay gas for every order that gets submitted to the blockchain, the application should say, make a quick check against the 0x exchange contract and make sure that it is still fillable to the amount that the user expects to fill it for. So that's just in general a good practice on dealing with partially fillable orders on the 0x exchange contract. Any questions about partial fills?
Yeah, I have one question. How do fees get handled for partial fills? If
sure,
yeah.
So with any 0x order, when an order is created, part of the data that gets cryptographically signed is a fee to be paid by the maker and a fee to be paid by the taker. And each of those fees are going to be paid in ZRX. That is the only token that fees can be paid with in the 0x protocol. But for example, with OpenRelay, we charge 0.2 ZRX as a fee for any orders that are posted on OpenRelay. So if somebody came along and filled half of that order, they would only pay half of that fee. Then if somebody else comes along and fills the other half of that order, they're going to pay the other half of that fee. So the fee that gets paid is the fee for the entire order. And if you fill a partial order, then you pay a partial fee corresponding to the percentage of the order that you filled. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. The only other question I have on that front is if one of like an affiliate were to specify a higher fee for some reason or an additional fee, would that also follow the same rule?
Yeah. So as far as the 0x exchange contract is concerned, it doesn't actually know or care what fees the relayer wants to charge. It's up to the relayer not to list an order on their order book if it does not include whatever fees they require. But the 0x exchange contract has no idea what fees a relayer wants to impose. It's really up to the relayer just not to include an order if it doesn't include the fees that they want to collect.
Perfect. Thank you.
So with an open order book system, where it is that you can view and list trades and orders posted into other exchanges because you're using the shared order book, the shared order book APIs. If there's a fee specified on for one exchange that isn't the fee that for one exchange on their contract or on whenever they set up the contract through their system, does that fee go to you, or does that fee go to the original relayer that had that transaction posted to them?
So each order specifies one fee recipient that receives both the maker fee and the taker fee when an order gets filled. The 0x exchange contract looks at the fee on the order and collects the fees from the maker and the taker and pays them to the fee recipient specified on the contract. So if, for example, OpenRelay were serving orders that came out of Radar Relay's order book, if Radar Relay has a fee on an order and it gets filled by somebody who found it on OpenRelay, Radar Relay gets the fee for that, and OpenRelay does not really get any benefit from that unless they have some agreement with Radar Relay. Any other questions?
Bad wording.
Sorry?
Thank you. Sorry for the bad wording.
That's all right. Any other questions? Okay. Next time, hopefully we will have another Screenside chat in 2 weeks. I've been kind of bad about keeping to the schedule. But in 2 weeks, I hope to talk about OpenRelay order pools, which are a feature that we're working on. I don't know that they'll be quite ready to launch in 2 weeks, but they should be far enough developed that we can talk about them and get some community interest in how they work and what they do. So, unless anybody has any other questions, that's all I have for today. All right, thank you guys for coming, and thank you all for watching.
Thanks, Austin.
Thank you.